No mai, haere mai, ki tēnei hui. Welcome everybody. We are resuming the meeting of the Kōrau Tōtōpū Long-Term Plan Finance Performance Committee of the 9th of May to continue hearing oral submissions on the LTP. So I would like to welcome Heather Garside. You can take the podium if that's comfortable for you, Heather. And you have, or you can sit at the table, whatever you would prefer. You've got copies to distribute? Thank you. And we'll put the timer on so you have 5 minutes, and that includes time for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, kia ora. I'm Heather Garside. Thank you so much for hearing me. I feel mostly nervous because of the short time. Democracy, yay, it's great to be here. I'm talking on behalf of myself as an individual, but also very much in the context of my work at Kelvin Play Centre. So I've been there since for 33 years, For 33 years, first as a parent, then as a volunteer, then as an employee. I'm currently an employee of Play Centre Aotearoa and work at various play centres, including Kelvin. And I want to speak especially on behalf of my space parents. So what I've handed out to you is, first of all, on the top, just a Google Earth illustration of the roads and the parking around Kelvin Play Centre, and underneath is all the various plans of the work we do. You may or may not have heard of SPACE, which is a program for first-time parents and their babies that runs for 30 weeks over 3 terms, therefore from about 3 months old or so, maybe younger, until the babies are 1 year old. And they come once a week for those 30 weeks for a 2.5-hour session. Kelvin Play Centre currently has 3 to 4 afternoon sessions. It's 3 this term, but it has been 4, and it will be 4 in the future every week. And each session has 15 parents and 15 babies coming to it, so that's like 60 babies and 60 parents a week accessing the centre where there's limited parking. In the past, there have been discussions with the council. This is a long time ago, about 30 years ago, and we have 3-hour car parks, just a few of them down Kōrau Road, which we very much appreciate. The morning sessions, which are all-age sessions, there's one every day of the week, run by volunteers who are giving their time and their energy. We get no pay for this and some government support, but not as much as other early childhood centres. And they are there for at least 3 hours because of the session duties they do, which is under the licence of the centre, which is a fully licensed early childhood centre. So those 3-hour car parks are appreciated, but I'm concerned mostly about the parents who are the first-time parents who come to my space sessions, who come from all over the city, not necessarily just Kelvin. They come based on the age of their baby to the centre at the session that suits them best. And they are vulnerable, and they're full of hormones, and they're sleep deprived, and the statistics will tell me that at least 1 or 2 of them are suffering from depression at some point during that year. And so this is a really important accessible program to them, which I'm so excited to be part of delivering. And I'm concerned that if they have to pay $4 to $5 an hour, $45 an hour, to park during a 2.5-hour session, this will make it inaccessible to some of our parents, and perhaps many of them. And perhaps that's an unintended consequence of the parking that you're proposing. I don't know whether the paid parking you're proposing is to go down Kōwhai Road or just on Upland Road, which at the moment has coupon parking, which allows for the first 2 hours free, which is really great for us. But it means that people who park there all day to go to the city or to the university do pay, and that seems fair enough to me. So that's my main concern, really, about the unintended consequences for my families, which I'm working with and am passionate about. Any questions?
Yeah, are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Pannett.
Thank you for the great work you do. I was a play centre baby as well. Yep. I just wonder, are there lots of play centres around the city? Because hopefully people would be able to access them reasonably easily and don't have to come all the way to Kelvin.
They don't have to go to Kelvin, but Kelvin, since it was extended, the building, some time ago, with the help of the council's permissions and what have you as well, is now a really ideal place because we have a large open carpeted area which we can have all the babies and the parents on the floor on the mats. It's quite central. So people come to Kelvin because it's actually the age of their baby, and that's the time the session is available to them. They roll over. The session goes 30 weeks, and then we start a new session with new tiny babies. So it just depends on when the babies are born and what age they are and where they're accessible. It's not in any way zoned. It's to do with ages and stages, really. So, yeah, the people are coming from, in my latest group, which is this afternoon, it's a brand new group with the third week. Some are coming from Whitby, some are coming from Brooklyn, some might come from Miramar, because they've decided that Friday suits them and this is the age and stage that their baby is at for this group. Yeah.
Councillor Chung, quick question, please.
Yeah, great. So, sorry, you're just confirming that people come at all times of the day, so that a targeted time for parking wouldn't actually be necessarily of any benefit?
No, the morning sessions run from 9 till 12, and that is the all-age sessions for the standard play centre, and the space sessions run from 12:30 to 3.
Oh, I see.
Mostly so that facilitators can go and pick up their own children from school if they have them, if it's within the school hours.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. We appreciate you taking the time to make a submission and to come and speak with us today.
Yes. May I make one parting comment about the cycle lanes? I, as a driver, I really appreciate the cycle lanes because I'm less afraid of knocking over a cyclist, and especially up Aro Valley, there's so much more room for me to drive without the parking there. I really hope to be a cyclist one day. I certainly was when I grew up in Christchurch, and so far I'm waiting for the links to happen when I feel safe and my husband will let me go on a bike. The moment he says I'm not allowed to. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Heather. We appreciate it. I'd now like to welcome Lee and Clint, Vulnerable Support Charitable Trust. You can sit at the table if you'd like, so you can both sit, and as long as we get those mics with a green light on, and you have 10 minutes, including time for questions. Kia ora.
Kia ora, good morning. Thank you for all your time. We're here to talk about Take 10. Take 10 is a safe space on Courtney Place. It operates every Friday, Saturday from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning. And what it does is it creates an area where tourists and students and residents and people that live in the city can walk past. They can get some water, they can charge their phones, and if they need help, they can actually get help without judgment or feeling as if there's an authoritative figure there. Take 10 was started in 2016 with the idea. I moved to the city in 2015. I fell in love with Wellington and love Wellington as we all do. And I was out a few nights and realized there was a change in dynamic in the city later as the night progressed, and started working on the idea of creating a space which would help people that need help in the city. And a friend of ours, their daughter was in university. She was out in the city one night. Her phone died. She got separated from her friends and started walking back to a res hall and got jumped by 2 guys who sexually assaulted her. She ended up committing suicide 8 months later. And that was one of the driving forces behind Take 10. It began with an idea, but then when we realized the impact Take 10 could have and does have on people's lives, that helped us push it through. It took us 18 months to get started. We did a 6-month trial, and it was estimated that we'd only have a few hundred people a month come through us. We have over 2,500 to 5,000 people come through us a night. And that's getting water, that's charging their phones, that's needing help. That could be just a conversation with somebody that's had a bad day or had some alcohol and is in a bad state and just needs to offload or get a bit of sunshine in their day. We help people get homes if they get stuck. A lot of clothing, what people wear, don't have pockets. So if they get separated from their friends, they can't get home. They can't connect to their friends. They're stuck in the city and they become vulnerable. And people become vulnerable when they separate from their friends. Take 10 has become a meeting spot for people, either when people are coming into the city or if they get separated. If they need to charge their phones or to get an Uber, they come to us. If they can't get home, they come to us, and we make sure that everybody that comes to us that needs help gets home safe. I'm just going to change slides. Sorry, yep. I do.
We're passionate about Take 10 because we know it works. We've been there 6 years and we've seen it. We've heard it from people. They come to us every week. people from out of town say we need this in our town, in our city. One of our volunteers who's just gone back to Germany, he was here for 6 months. The last thing he said to me on Friday night was, I'm going to go and set up a Take 10 in Berlin. It's needed everywhere. We know it's needed. We know it's needed in Auckland. It's needed all over the country. But in Wellington, it's made a difference to the nighttime economy. Wellington City Council benefit because people always say to us, is this a Wellington City Council initiative? We're part of the Poneki Promise, so yes, we partner with Wellington City Council. Wellington City benefit, it's just a benefit to the whole city and to the police, to the regulatory services. So we know it's needed, and we're here today because we want to sustain it for the next 10 years. We're part of the multi-year funding, so we've got funding until next year, but it needs to be long-term. It's part of Wellington now, and we need it to continue.
Take 10 has a ripple effect. So it's that drink of water, it's that conversation that prevents harm. We are one of the few organizations in the city that operate on Friday, Saturday nights that are preventative. We're not the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. We prevent a lot of harm happening to our children, to potentially your children, your grandchildren. Tourists that come to the city, nobody wants to go out, have fun, and be harmed or something happen to them. And we don't want that to happen in our city. We want our city to be a really positive space where people can come out, feel safe, and bring their families to the city. I'm just moving through. On an average, you can see some of the figures, and they're very reserved, those figures. We hand out over 2,000 cups of water a night, and that would be a quiet night. That would be a Friday. Saturday would far exceed that. And when we have large events in the city, sometimes we 7,500 to 8,000 units of water that we hand out and interact with people. We have people coming to charge their phone constantly throughout the night, and that's a time where we can have a conversation with them and connect with them. Take 10 is a very trusted brand. People know it, and they feel comfortable. We're not judgmental. We're not associated to any religious organizations. We're there for the people. We're there so people can feel safe and be safe. We get an average of 5 Uber rides a night, and that's anywhere. That's to Upper Hutt, that's to Wainui, Kapiti. But we make sure we don't judge. If a person needs help and they can't get home, instead of them floating around in the city and potentially getting harmed or harm coming to them, we'd rather put them in an Uber and get them home safe. And as I said, we have over 5,000 plus people a weekend, and that's a very reserved number that we interact with. And those are people that come to the city. Those are tourists. Those are people from overseas or from different parts of New Zealand that come through, and also including students. There's heaps of students that go out and just need somebody, if they do run into trouble, to help and assist them. What does Take 10 do? We've already spoken a lot about what Take 10 does. Brad Olson, who I'm sure you all know, did a fair bit of work around what the money we save the city through our preventative action. And we save the city millions each year through preventative. And that's through people preventing to go to A&E, which is already at busting point, and also counselling if something does happen, or the physio, or all the care afterwards. We help prevent a lot of that happening. We obviously offer safe rides. We trusted in the space, and we provide friendly. We have an incredible team of volunteers, people that give up their Friday, Saturday nights because they believe in what Take 10 stands for, and they want to connect with the city, and they want to make Wellington a beautiful, safe city where people can go out and have a good night. And we support the nighttime economy. The nighttime economy is just as important as the daytime economy. There's a lot of business people and families that want to go out and just have fun and go out for dinner or be out in the city and feel safe. Anything? We have a lot of people that use us many times, and we have a lot of regulars. And the amount of comments we get where we've had is, "You've saved our lives. The times you got me home. Thank you so much." We have people, I can tell you countless stories. We've also had people that have been, drinks have been spiked and friends have brought them to us because they didn't know where else to take them. Or people that have been followed by creepy guys or guys that have given them something and then follow them out the bar. They come to us because they know they're safe with us. We look after them. We either contact their friends or make sure they get home, and we make sure that our city is looked after. And that's what Take 10 is. And we believe that Take 10 should be in the next 10-year plan, because we help keep the city safe and contribute to the preventative action of crime.
I have a lot of questions.
Right. I've got lots of answers.
I don't want to cut you off. Paui Kelly.
Oh, through you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you for the mahi that you do. And my question is very quick. Do you get other funding, or is it predominantly from Wellington City Council?
We do get other funding, but Wellington City Council does give us a fair amount. We're wanting to do we've did a 3-month pop-up, so we're wanting the funding to include the pop-up. They two different sides of Courtney Place. One is by Lucky Chicken by Taranaki Street, and the other one is further down by Blair and Allen. And we operated both. They both have different dynamics. One is right in the party central, where a lot of the clubs, bars, and people bring people to us.
So my question is around funding, though.
Yes.
So do you get any Crown funding?
No.
No, not yet.
Have you applied?
Yes, we have.
Oh,
We've-
good.
to
Because
both
there's a
governments.
special fund with MSD that would...
We've tried,
we have
and
tried.
we're still trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll continue to.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, you briefly touched on it. I was wondering if you could just talk about how important that second site had been to you over summer, and how important it would be to continue that through the winter periods as well.
Yeah, I'll go because I'm a bit quicker. The second site it's a completely different dynamic, and we saw that. We were surprised at how different it was, but because it's inside, over the winter we'll get a lot more, I think, people coming to stay longer, sober up so they can get home safely. So it's interesting how different it is, but yeah, it was surprising how much it's needed, and because it's closer to the bars, it's more central to those bars, we get a lot of the bouncers and staff bringing people over, straight over.
And we have thousands of people coming through that space every night. That need help, or it's just that drink of water. And that water potentially could give them the clarity of a decision between getting harmed or doing something wrong or not.
I'm sorry, we are out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think this opportunity to express our appreciation for all the mahi that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. No mai to our next submitter who's online, Amy Lou. Kia ora, Amy. You have 5 minutes, and if you want to have any time for questions, that's included in that 5 minutes. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. First of all, I'd just like to say a huge mihi to all of the councillors and for all of the hard work they've put into the long-term plan, and all of the hard work they've done over the last couple of years to make improvements to Wellington. As you will have seen from my submission, I'm in agreement with the key proposed solutions to the three key proposals. I'm also in agreement with the proposed changes to the parking fees. The main issue that I'd like to bring to your attention, which I would encourage you to reconsider, is around the cycling infrastructure in the city. So as someone who has used cycling as a main mode of transport for some years now, I have been heartened by the vision and the leadership that Wellington City Council has shown up until now in its proposals for a joined up cycle network. So although I was regularly cycling to get around long before the introduction of bike lanes, I've been heartened by how many other people who are now choosing to get around by bike, so including children and families. And I read recently in a tweet from Mayor Tory Whānau that there's been an increase of 140% in bike trips from Newtown to the city since 2022, which is amazing. And of course, the recent recognition that Wellington City Council got from the Bloomberg Prize was also amazing. So with this in mind, I just sort of feel that it's short-sighted to not be continuing with the full extent of the vision for the cycling network. I do understand that times are hard politically and financially, but I think the Wellington City Council has done a really good job of showing vision and leadership on this issue up until now. And especially in the light of having just won the Bloomberg Prize, I think now is not the time to crumble under pressure, but the time to be kind of brave and to execute the vision for the long-term benefits that we all know that it will bring. And if any of the councillors would like some inspiration along these lines, I can recommend Jeanette Sadiq Khan's book, Street Fight. In particular, in relation, obviously, to the long-term plan, I would ask the councillors to reconsider the proposal to discontinue the Hutt Road portion of the Thorndon Quay to Hutt Road project. So according to the Wellington City Council website, the Hutt Road is one of the busiest commuter routes and a crucial link in the region's wider cycle network. And more than 400 people cycle this way at peak times, and the number choosing to use a bike path has doubled in the past 10 years. Personally, I've cycled the Hutt Road in its current form on a number of occasions, but on the other hand, it's not a route at the moment that I would feel comfortable recommending to the uninitiated, and it's not a route that most of my friends and colleagues who are kind of less comfortable cycling would feel comfortable cycling on at the moment. And I think in order to really foster and encourage active transport as a way to get around and to meet our targets for decarbonisation and people-friendly cities, we really need a bike network that is connected and that is accessible to all. So also on the wider kind of bike network, I would also encourage you to reconsider some of the proposed cutbacks to the wider bike network. I believe that cutting funding now is short-sighted. Like, I understand there's financial pressures, but I believe that it's not true to the vision that Wellington City Council has shown in the past, and that it doesn't honour the manner of the organisers of the Bloomberg Initiative for Cycling Infrastructure, who recognised the vision that the council had. On the one hand, I do, as I said, I do understand that it can. I understand the rationale for the changes in terms of trying to cut cost savings, but I don't necessarily think that rationale is a good one. So in the context of the overall spending for the council, I think even a saving of 10 million or 20 million is not that significant and could be recuperated through other means. Whilst on the other hand, making investment into good bike infrastructure now will have far-reaching benefits for years to come. And if we wait to fund these changes until the future, these costs are only going to rise. It's going to become more expensive to do it later on than it is to do it now. So I would urge councillors to consider kind of short-term over long-term decisions. On another point, I think although obviously the political climate has changed nationally, I still believe strongly that Wellington City Council has a mandate from its citizens to continue with projects like this, which are progressive and visionary. And I believe these are the projects that Wellingtonians want and deserve. So collectively, obviously, we've elected a Green Party mayor, and a deputy mayor. We've got 2 Green MPs at the MP level, and most recently a new Green councillor for Wellington Central. So although I imagine that through this consultation process, the councillors will hear from a vocal minority of people who oppose progressive changes, I would encourage you to stay true to the vision that Wellingtonians have voted for and that will benefit them long term.
Amy, I'm
thank
so
you
sorry.
for your
We're out
time.
of Oh, it looks like you were just finishing up.
I was just finishing up, yeah.
Perfect timing. Thank you so much for taking the time to make this submission, Amy Lou. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And I'd like to now welcome our next submitter, who's also online, Chris Forge, on behalf of Disabled Persons Assembly. Kia ora, Chris. You have 10 minutes and including time for any questions.
Kia ora koutou, Chris for Tokawinua. I'm Policy Advisor, Southern and Central at Disabled Persons Assembly New Zealand. DPA is a Power Impairment Disabled Persons organisation that works on systemic change to realise an equitable society. Chair Councillor Matthews-Heron, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to present DPA's submission on the Wellington City Council's long-term plan. Before delving into our submission, we reiterate our congratulations to the Council on its initiatives to improve accessibility and inclusion for the city's disabled community through, for example, the recent openings of more raised crossings, something that disabled people and others in the community have long lobbied for. Given the limited time available, I would like to highlight 2 key points from our submission. Those on suburban parking changes, parking fees, and bike network sustainable street changes. Firstly, parking changes, parking fees. As stated in DPA's submission, local disabled people are concerned about the proposal to impose parking precinct fees. For disabled motorists and drivers carrying disabled people, there will be an inability to pay these charges, given that many live on low incomes. DPA acknowledges that the changes are aimed at encouraging better use of existing car parks, especially at busier times, but this may not be a suitable solution for everyone, as some disabled people do have and need their own vehicles for convenience and accessibility. DPA recommended in our submission that Council create more mobility parks as a means of addressing this issue, as it would enable disabled people to park without charge. Secondly, bike network and sustainable street changes. Here, we note Council's proposal to introduce more cycleways and reduce the number of parking spaces in parts of the city. In our submission, we acknowledge the importance of people taking up active transport modes, including walking and cycling, as a means of increasing personal well-being and to reduce climate emissions. However, DPA reiterate here that the needs of disabled pedestrians have been ignored in the design of the proposed cycleways. There needs to be a redesign of cycle lanes so members of the community, including disabled people, can get out of their homes, cross safely, and feel safe. The current design ignores the needs of older and disabled people. DPA recommends that disabled and older people are fully involved in discussions around any proposals to establish cycleways, particularly around their location and design. This ends our submission, Councillor Matthews-Heron. Councillors, back to you for any questions.
Kia ora, Chris. I do have a question, and I want to thank you and for all the work that DPA does, and it's always nice to see you. My question is, I understand the point that not all feedback has necessarily been seen in changes, but are you aware that we have had disabled people representation on our reference groups when we do design the cycleways? So that has been part of our processes, and yeah, so I just wanted to check if you were aware of that.
We weren't aware of that until now, but thank you for that, Councillor.
Councillor Chung has a question for you.
Thank you very much for making the time to talk to us about this. I have a question. When you talk about consideration isn't given, or sorry, enough consideration is actually given to disabled people, is there one size fits all? I do think that if you suggest some changes, would that apply in every area, or do you actually need different designs for different areas or for different types of disabled people?
You're talking about, I assume, Councillor, the cycleways. Well, it's really about having disabled people's views. I mean, obviously, as you point out, disabled people are very different in terms of impairment, and within impairment groups, there can be different needs as well, and different needs. However, it's really important to get the broadest representation of views from the disabled community, and that's why we emphasise it's really important that disabled people are a part of the decision-making process. And as Councillor Matthews-Heron has pointed out, that is indeed the case. It would be really good for us to, as DPA, know who the representative is on the cycling reference panel, on the cycling routes reference group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
Thank you very much for coming in. I recognise this is outside of what you submitted, but we had another submitter come in to talk about the ability to have accessibility audits of some of our council facilities. And I was wondering if that was something that had come across your community and the people you're representing today.
Yes, it's always good, councillor, to have accessibility audits conducted of council buildings because they're very commonly visited by a wide range of Wellingtonians, obviously. I think it's quite important that we think it's quite important that that does happen, that council continues to do that and invests in that activity.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Councillor Free, online, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Kia ora. I'm just wondering if you think we are actually collecting enough evidence about the effectiveness of some of the things we're doing, like raised crossings and curb build-outs. Do you think, we've just been talking about KPIs earlier this morning, do you think we actually do enough monitoring and collect enough feedback about how these things are actually being experienced once they're implemented?
Thank you, councillor, for your question. I know that there is a disability advisory group, accessibility advisory group attached to the Wellington City Council, but I think that as with all councils around the country, Wellington City Council can always do better in terms of the data that it collects around, for example, disability and the needs of disabled people, and in terms of accessibility in particular, as the previous question covered. I think we think it's really important that it become a KPI if it isn't already a KPI.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Randall has a question.
Yes, I've got a couple actually.
One, sorry, because other people are on the queue.
Okay, so I guess if I've got only one question, in terms of your comments around the design of the cycleways really not meeting the requirements, can you just point to any particular elements of the cycleway design that we're putting in place, such as the design of the bus stops, for example, or what is it that actually is concerning you, or is it actually just about the route assessment and layout?
Kia ora, councillor. I think that basically I haven't heard the specifics. I've only gotten the general feedback. I'm based, as a matter of fact, in Tōtōpū, Dunedin, and I work with disabled people around the country in my DPA members in my advisory role. So the specifics I'm not aware of. However, I've heard broadly that there are issues around, for example, pedestrian crossings, making sure that there is no clash with those, and also ensuring that, as I stated in the submission, there is a real need, for example, to address excuse me, that people can get out of their homes, cross safely and feel safe. That's the main consideration there.
Thank you.
And one last question I think we've got time for from Councillor Pennant.
Thank you, Chris. Good to see you. Just scooters on footpaths. You may be aware that we've renewed our licence for them. Have you got any suggestions about how we redesign pavements also for safety as well as cycleways?
Well, DPA has a position that we take with all councils around the country that there should be separate but parallel spaces for multimodal use, and that includes making sure that access ways for pedestrian users, and that includes wheelchair users, mobility device users, and people who are mobilising on foot are separated from those for cyclists and also e-scooter users, because that's a particular concern. E-scooter use is of a particular concern to disabled people. For example, I've encountered here in Dunedin where there is also a licence that's been granted by our council to a provider, that I've encountered scooters being left across the footpath and so forth, and it's a real pain. So there is a need for that to be considered separate but parallel.
Thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate the time putting into to both writing the submission and answering our many questions. Ka kite.
Thank you. Ka kite, Councillor.
All right, I would now like to welcome our next submitter, Tim Bennett, to the podium. No mai, Tim, you have 5 minutes, including questions if you'd like to, as part of that 5 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to submit on, or to present on my submission. Before I start, I think we've probably got two things in common. One is that we all want affordable, growing Wellington. And the second is, I think we all realise that the council is in a very difficult financial position as a result of decades of underinvestment in essential infrastructure, but also decades of overinvestment in non-essential infrastructure or vanity projects, and also decades of overspending, which has been funded by commercial ratepayers. Have the first slide, please. What I've done is, or second slide then. What I've done is looked at the council spending in the long-term plan relative to other councils on three different dimensions. One is operating expenditure, including depreciation and amortisation. Depreciation and interest. Depreciation and interest and debt. On all of these metrics, the council's 10-year plan delivers the worst outcome in the country. On operating expenditure, we already spend $1,000 per person per year more than Christchurch to deliver the same services. That gap grows to $1,500 a year by the end of the long-term plan. Depreciation and interest, which is a measure of the cost of our infrastructure, grows from 30% of the budget at the beginning of the long-term plan to 42% at the end. And that ties the hands of councils going forward in terms of their level of investment. Debt is 30% higher than Auckland or Christchurch at the end of the long-term plan, and that is compared to councils that have significant investment in other assets, the ports, the airports, Christchurch City Holdings. The net result of all of that, if you include the Greater Wellington Regional Council rates, is we're going to add 1% to the cost of owning a property in Wellington. That combined with earthquake insurance costs will mean that what is already unaffordable city for first home buyers will become increasingly more unaffordable going forward. Next slide, please. This plan delivers 30% increased operating costs over 2021's plan and 60% increase in capital expenditure. That would be fine if that capital expenditure was actually focused on fixing Three Waters infrastructure. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Only 25% of the CapEx in the next 10 years proposed goes to Three Waters. We're going to spend around $6,000 per person. Hutt City will spend $14,000. In absolute terms, they plan to spend $1.6 billion, and we are spending $1.3. This level of spending is simply insufficient to address the infrastructure gap we have. What are we spending our money on? Well, 75% of it is outside of Three Waters. I know there are some one-off costs here, the Civic Square, housing. But even if you include those, still the majority of capital expenditure going forward is outside of those assets and Three Waters. Why is that? It's because when we build things, we need to maintain and depreciate them. I don't want to have a go at cycleways, and I acknowledge the comments before, but there's 100-odd million plus planning costs, so 150 million in long-term planning for cycleways. There's also $100 million for maintenance. As I said before, every time we build something, we need to maintain it, depreciate it, and we have to fund it. Next slide. That would be fine if we were a growing city, but we're not. The population here has grown at half the rate of the rest of the country in the last 10 years, and Stats NZ expect that trend to continue. Wellington will shrink relative to the region and the country. Most of the revenue for the council comes from commercial ratepayers and other sources of rates revenue, non-rates revenue. Commercial ratepayers are under pressure. If you look at people count coming into Wellington, and it's hard data to get, since before the pandemic, somewhere between a 2 and 20% reduction in either rail, bus, or light vehicle traffic into the city. Because of work from home, because of affordability outside of Wellington City, people just aren't coming to the city. Commercial ratepayers here pay 2 to 3 times what they pay in other cities. If we're going to attract new landlords, new restaurant owners, new shop owners to the city, we simply cannot continue to rely on them as a source of revenue when their customer base is declining. Many councils have looked at how they're going to increase non-rates revenue. Indeed, I think this council has as well.
I'm sorry, Mr Bennett, we are out of time. If you could make a final comment?
Sure.
Thank you.
But as you can see, that is declining. This council has a challenge. It has a fiscal hole, to paraphrase Nicola Willis or Grant Robertson. This plan delivers a deeper fiscal hole. It does not deliver growth, and it does not deliver affordability for ratepayers. The council needs to rethink its plan. Otherwise, you're just kicking the can down the road for the next set of councillors around the table in 3 years' time.
Thank you. And no, I'm sorry, we were out of time. Thank you.
Can I ask that this presentation be tabled? Thank you.
All the presentations are included. Thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time. No mai, Felicity Wong on behalf of Historic Places Wellington. Welcome, Felicity. You have 10 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
People are already leaving. No. Is that on? Okay, kia ora, councillors. Look, I cycled here this morning, and I just want to say it's an absolutely beautiful day out there, and there's 2 enormous waka on the harbour. It's fantastic. And yesterday when I was cycling home, there were thousands of graduates with their fabulous cloaks in town. So, you know, you've got a really tough job, but out there in the real world is quite nice. I want to talk about an historic asset sale of the worst kind. I'm going to torture you. So, first let me welcome the F. Gordon Wilson Fellowship for Public Housing, a new NZIA fellowship funded by the descendants of Labour government architect Gordon Wilson. And the fellowship promotes creative design thinking, problem solving, and new ideas and approaches to unmet housing needs across Aotearoa, New Zealand. Built 65 years ago, the Gordon Wilson flats contain 75 two-storey masonette flats, each with an internal staircase. The maisonettes have wonderful sunlight access, excellent natural through-flow ventilation, superb views across the city, and native timber tawa floors. Many of their previous residents loved living there, including Councillor Pennant, and a young Councillor Chung even delivered vegetables to the residents, who kindly and generously shared what little food they had with him. Thank you to those 2 councillors for understanding why the building is a monument to public housing. My late colleague, the kindest Ben Schrader, Vice President of Historic Places Wellington, wrote about the history of public housing. When they were built by the Ministry of Works, public housing was provided for a wider range of New Zealanders, and today it's provided only for the most desperate, impoverished people. After public housing became targeted in that way, the 2-storey flats didn't suit the Housing Corp's tenants, some of whom would struggle up the stairs. It's not that the flats weren't suitable as warm, dry housing, just not for those tenants. It is, however, a top-class fire safety building, each flat being a completely separate concrete zone with open walkways at the rear of each level, a government designed to avoid the appalling tragedy of Loafers Lodge. The lack of investment and maintenance by the Housing Corp resulted in the removable concrete balcony panels on the facade of the building being deemed earthquake-prone. The asset was then sold during the John Key government to Victoria University for $10. In fact, the building is well earthquake engineered with reinforced concrete, 190 deep foundations and 200 millimetre thick cellular construction, which has endured. Current new builds are only required to be of a 50-year duration. The Ministry of Works built that building to last a very long time. Internationally, there are many examples of an alternative, socially responsible and green approach. Mid-century residential tower blocks are being valued and renovated with new facades. The refurbishment of a similar apartment block in Bordeaux, France, won an Architect and Environment Prize for Sustainable Approach, which was showcased at NZIA, New Zealand Institute of Architects' February conference. The Gordon Wilson Flats could be renovated for affordable housing, acknowledging its history of use, the amenity value of its infrastructure, and ongoing prudent use of natural resources. Wellingtonians could be proud. The irony is that some advocates of high-density housing want them demolished. The Architecture Centre recently shared its vision for the site, including the neighbouring McLean Flats, in an open letter to Housing Minister Chris Bishop. The plan includes a cable car to the Kelburn campus, refurbishing the 150-bedroom flats, landscaping the site, and adding a new timber office building. Architecture Centre President Paul Harvey said, "The building can be modified for contemporary needs, facilitates a good standard of living, is efficient in form and compatible with passive design that is worth celebrating and recovering for the future." Residents of Wellington City. Reusing the concrete apartment building would be much more sustainable, as it would be environmentally negligent to demolish a sound building. Considering the expense of demolition and rebuilding and factoring in the current price of new construction materials, Paul Harvey said, "It will be economically favourable. Councillors, please hear us and have an open mind about this extraordinary building." Ka pai.
We have a question from Councillor Young.
Felicity, thank you for all that you do, and on most things which I agree with you, apart from Gordon Wilson. So just going back some years ago, when we were in this, still in the soon-to-be demolished mob building, heritage expert Maurice Clark told us that the Gordon Wilson apartments were riddled with concrete cancer and could not be economically saved. Just wonder if you have any comment on that. I'm not an engineer, as you know.
I do, and you will recall when each of us were at the Wellington Club and he was giving a conversation and then he drove us home afterwards, I had an argument with him about the Gordon Wilson Flats, and he conceded that his evidence was misreported. What he said was that he couldn't make the numbers work and he didn't want to refurbish them. Now, what's really interesting is that Ian Castles is now interested, and Ian and I have not always been on the same page, you will recall. But on this one, you know, I think I went to a talk he gave at the U3A a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about 40 empty buildings in Wellington. What are we going to do about these empty towers? You know, this is a huge environmental problem that nobody wants to talk about. Here's a situation where you could have a win-win. I think it is incumbent on all of us to put our thinking caps on and find that win-win. Councillor Young, you've been completely consistent in hating that building and wanting it demolished. And on Wednesday night, I also had an argument with a member of the National Party at the Wellington Club who had the unfortunate experience of sitting next to me at the Art Club dinner. And I tortured him for an hour and a half about the Gordon Wilson Flats. So I realise it's been the gift that keeps on giving for the media. You know, people have made their reporting careers out of this. But I do call on you for a number of reasons: economic, social and environmental. Have another think. Thank you.
Councillor Pannett.
Well, I do appreciate your work on the Gordon Wilson Flats, obviously, so thank you very much. You'll be aware that there is a cut to the Heritage Information Service as part of our bid to keep rates down. Could you just give your perspective on that? Thank you.
Look, I'm deeply distressed about it, but I decided not to talk about that because you're in a really hard spot. I think it's dreadful. frankly, I think it's dreadful that heritage information services is to be cut, because it's quite a, as you've said yourselves, heritage can be, an issue of different views. And that's one way of trying to meet those views, of helping folk who sort of might come to the council for advice, and you can give them advice as to reaching those win-win solutions. So I think it's saving pennies and spending pounds. I don't think it's wise for you.
Councillor McNulty, you have a question online?
Yeah, kia ora, sorry for listening up to be there in the room today. I was just curious about the earthquake figures you're referencing to, because the 2015 detailed seismic assessment had the superstructure of the building at less than 34% NBS. So I'm just wondering where your view of the earthquake strengthening of the building has come from.
Yeah, as I explained, there's parts of the building that are earthquake prone, and you will know yourself that when a building is assessed as earthquake prone, often people take the assumption that it's the whole building and all over the building that has that rate, if you like. But that is not the case. There are different parts of different buildings, and in the case of the Gordon Wilson, it's the removable balcony panels that were the main problem. That building was built to withstand, practically nuclear war. I mean, you can look at any of the other Ministry of Work buildings around the place, and the dams and bridges that they built, they employed New Zealand's best and most thoughtful engineers, and the quality of the Ministry of Work stuff was actually over-engineered. That was sort of their decline. Their demise was caused because they did build these things too well, but that was the last thing they built for housing.
My apologies, we are out of time, but we now go to a break, so if councillors would like to have a chat with Felicity, they can do so over the break. We will come back. Thank you for the time, you and for coming in to speak with us today. Councillors, we can be back seated at 11:30. we're ready to start, and our next submitter I'd like to welcome to the podium or the table, whichever you prefer, Marion Layton. And you're speaking as an individual today, Marion. You've got 5 minutes, including time for questions. No mai.
Good time. There we go. I appreciate that. I don't want to come and say the same thing twice, so imagine I'm saying it twice. And I would have come by Zoom, but I couldn't find the Zoom link, so I jumped on my bicycle, zoomed down your fabulous new cycle lanes, and was here within 15 minutes with no parking troubles at all. So that was fabulous. I suppose, rather than going over my submission, which you can all read exactly, I just want to come here to talk about. We have for years not increased rates as much as we should have done because our generations, who are now mostly our older generations in the city, have said, don't do it, we can't afford it, we don't want to increase rates. And that has deferred maintenance on our city for decades. And now, I don't know, I'm kind of assuming that maybe these people hoped they would be dead before it came back to be a problem, and that their grandchildren would have to suddenly pay for all the pipes and all the infrastructure and everything else. And just like climate change, it's all happened a lot faster than we maybe thought it would 20, 30 years ago. So here we are, actually having to deal with it. It is a big rates rise. If we take it back across the 30 years of not increasing the rates as much as we should have done through all of that time, it's not such a big rise. Maybe those of us who've lived in Wellington for 20, 30 years should pay extra to make up for all the rates we haven't paid, because we've been saying don't increase rates for all this time, and the young people should pay less and get a rebate. I don't know, lots of ideas there, but I do say don't kick things down the road. These things are really important, and we do need to fix the pipes. Unfortunately, we do have to pay for that. That is just the reality of it. We do also, however, need to keep growing our city and making it a fabulous place to live. And ditching things like the cycleway network is a total false economy. Look at other things that we did that were seen as, nice to haves that the council fought over. For instance, the Kōrau Wildlife Sanctuary. We are now talk of the world for our bird life, and yet this council in the 90s fought against that sanctuary and said, no, we don't want to put the money into it, and sent them off to find private investors who fell through time and time again because it doesn't work, because actually as a community we have to work together to make these things work. I mean, the Oriental Parade Breach is another example. I can't imagine now all those that rocky shoreline and all those people who come to enjoy the Oriental Parade Beach every day and how fabulous it is. And yet that again was oh no, it's just a vanity project. But it contributes to our city every single day. So and the cycle lanes aren't vanity projects. They're absolutely crucial to reducing congestion and improving flow through our city, and it's already been seen. So please keep those things going. Focus on things that will support our community as well as things that support our infrastructure. And that's probably it with about 2 seconds. Oh, I've got 2 minutes apparently. Must have started late. Ask me questions.
Yes, Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. These are great words. And this is not an ideological question. The rates are going to a point where they are starting to get quite high in terms of people's income. So do you have any thinking about what needs to be prioritised? And as a doctor, obviously you'll be concerned with public health.
So yes, as a doctor concerned with public health, water is very dear to my heart. So from the waterway, the pipes are essential. We have to have clean water. It is the best public health measure in the world. And I think people almost take it for granted that we pay our taxes. And I do agree it's a lot of money. And any way you can find to spread that load more equitably, or have ways in which some people maybe pay more and other people pay less. I don't know how you do it, but it's got to be paid for. Our sewage is absolutely vital. We've already had polio outbreaks around the world in the last 2 years. That's a fecal-oral transmission. We do not actually have safe drinking water in this country. Hawke's Bay had Campylobacter. Mastodons had Cryptosporidium. We've had major outbreaks of awful diseases that have killed people because our water supplies have not been properly cared for by our community, which put you responsible for paying Wellington Water to make sure it happens. So, it's on us for saying we don't want to do this because we don't understand the implications of that, and we will end up with third world diseases if we don't. Obviously, from long-term pressures, the reason I want things like the cycle lanes is because that gets people out of their cars healthier, exercising and commuting and doing more things that they can do actively rather than passively and sitting around in cars all the time. But yeah, clean water is a no-brainer, unfortunately. But if you're going to dig up the road, put it back so it's lovely and smooth and has a cycleway on top of it. and yeah, I do know people are saying, why can't you do both? If you're going to dig up the road, check what you need to put underneath it, what goes on top and what goes underneath at the same time. So that's all working together.
Thank you very much, Marianne. We appreciate you taking the time to zoom over and see us. All right. I don't believe Marilyn is here, but Julia Brooke-White. No, Mai, welcome. Thank you for coming, being a bit early. Yes, wherever you'd like. You could, yeah. We'll just check. Councillor Pannett we'll make sure you've got your mic on, and you have 5 minutes, including time for questions. Welcome.
Thank you. I see there are a plethora of issues that people have turned up to speak about, but I only want to talk about the City to Sea Bridge. I hope there have been other submitters with the same concern. There has been a stream of letters to the papers recently on this issue. People wanting to see the bridge maintained and not demolished. The first compelling reason for saving the City to Sea Bridge is for pedestrian safety. Recently, I went with my grandchild from Te Aro School down to the waterfront, and we walked from there. We had to cross 8 roads in a crocodile formation. The lights aren't really set up for a long class to cross, so it was all very fraught. And when we got to the Civic Square, it was with huge relief. We saw the bridge ahead, and we knew we were going to be soon safely on the waterfront without having to cross that 6-lane Jervois Quay highway that the bridge goes over. There are many attractions for all ages on the waterfront. There's the Whare Waka, Te Papas, Circa, the Marina, the Port Nick Yacht Club, and if you go on the other direction, there's Fergs, the ferry, several different things, including cafes and restaurants. So the bridge is really well placed to be halfway between the huge pedestrian precinct with attractions at one end or the other. Our whole waterfront is really made for walking, and the bridge is really part of that possibility. The second compelling reason for saving the bridge is its value as an artwork. It was designed by Raewee Thompson and John Gray in the 1990s, and they were very forward-thinking in using contemporary Maori sculptors to do extraordinary artworks along the bridge. High-quality timber was used. I think it was New Zealand-grown redwoods and Australian hardwoods, so it was built for the long term. Paramatchit did grand-scale contemporary Maori sculpture in really chunky wood with motifs of the sea and our bicultural past. Matt Pine made 2 apparently classic stone sculptures at the city end, where the Civic Square is a much more formal space than the harbour side. And if you look closely, it's actually a Maori motifs, although they look sort of so European. The Civic Square is a bit of a mess at the moment, but we do expect it will become the city's heart again in due course. It's really cleverly designed. As I say, it's very classical and formal at the Civic Square end, and it's sort of casual, reminiscent of old wharves as you change from brick underfoot to wooden structures. The view from the top is simply amazing. It's really earth, sea, sky. It's huge. It's huge. You're out free of all those high-rise buildings, and you just get this huge panorama and a sky overhead. Public reaction to the bridge was mixed when it was first built, but now it's become a tourist attraction like no other in this country, and probably, as far as I know, globally. It opened one morning, one sunny afternoon it was, on 31st of October 1993, and I was watching from nearby Frank Kitts Park. I saw a huge crowd just flow up those stairs and disappear. They just vanished. And it was ages before anybody came out the other side. It made me realise just how big that wedge-shaped, capacious top to the bridge is. And I've loved that bridge ever since. It not only provides safe walking access, but it's also designed for people to linger with quirky seating behind the high walls. The sculpture makes really high walls that keep the wind out. So it's a very pleasant place to be in all weathers, really.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are out of time. If there's just one final comment you'd like to make, Julia.
Okay. I believe the bridge is not an earthquake risk. I believe that it suffers from some issues in that the piles don't reach the bedrock. But its future looks shaky, but I fervently hope that we don't lose our iconic bridge.
Thank you so much for coming in today. We really appreciate it. I believe David Belcher is here. No, my David. You have 5 minutes again, including time for any questions. Welcome.
Thank you. Is that working? I've come really in response to the proposed rates increase. You'll have all heard that Auckland have come out with a figure of 6.8%. I think they started much higher, but they have come to what's much more realistic. And I think you'll all be aware that in the last few years, the increases have been substantial every year. I don't know the exact number, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're up 50% in the last 5 years. Must be getting that way anyway. And I think most of the councillors here were elected on Green or Labor tickets that's supposed to look after the lower income folk. It certainly doesn't show up in the rates. So there are a number of areas where the council should be looking at more efficient use of funds. I might just mention the airport shares because there was a talk of the money from selling the shares going into green funds. My research on green funds shows very poor returns. There's been a fund in New Zealand for 9 years. Its average return is 3.2%, and I think that's pretty pathetic. I don't think that should be the issue. I think the airport's too important to give away that partial control that you have. You need to have some interest in it, and I did see about the risk from earthquakes and things, but I'm sure the airport themselves will have substantial insurance in place for their assets. There are some of the waste is not necessarily large, but I did ask council for a financial plan for the installing of parking meters. I live in Tawa, and I would like to see how much is going to be spent to bring in this plan, because in discussion with local folk, they're very upset and they'll do anything they can to avoid paying parking in the local area, and it'll be, I'm sure, similar in other areas around the city that is proposed. So I'm sure that if the people knew the facts, my son sought financial details and he was told that it was commercially confidential, so he couldn't have it. I don't think it's good enough. There should have been a plan put out to the people in the areas concerned, showing where you want to impose these charges and what it would cost to put it in place. It's a project destined to fail. It's on the level of let's get Wellington moving. Bins for rubbish. The proposal to bring in green bins, there was a figure of 120 million published, which I don't know where you're going to get that from, but there was a suggestion that most of the bins that we have for recycling were past their best before, that they're no longer useful. Well, that's not correct. Most of the bins are certainly quite satisfactory for a long time to come. And then you want to buy bins to put bottles on, wheelie bins. What's wrong with the crates we've already got? These are all things where you want to spend money that you haven't got. So I just don't see any need for any substantial change in that area. It's all these things add up and you haven't got the money. Efficiency. We need better efficiency about how things are done with the council. Now, have you been out to have a look at people fixing water leaks? I saw one fixed near our place. There was a number of trucks, probably 10 people. There were 2 guys looked like they were working, 2 guys directing the traffic, and the others were just supervising. What a waste. I mean, that activity could be done much more efficiently, and I suspect you probably have it contracted out to Downers or someone like that. It's not good enough. The leaks, you could fix more leaks for the same money. Needs to be better. Speed bumps, did I mention those? The cost of putting in speed bumps. For goodness sake, you only need that sparkly white paint painted on the road. That's all the law requires. So we don't need those expensive speed bumps put in, which they can be a problem for cars. The modern car has quite a low skirt at the front.
Sorry, excuse me, Mr. Boucher, we are out of time. If you'd like to make a final comment, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Basically, I asked for financial details, particularly with the parking, didn't get it. I spoke with Darren Ponta. He's been quite good about when I want information. We're not getting it from the Wellington City Council. They don't reply. We just need better efficiency, and 6.8 in Auckland, look at that.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come in and speak with us today and for writing your submission. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I just want to check. There doesn't seem to be any submitters on the room. Anybody online? Marilyn? No? Or D. Thomas? So what we will do, because we have the final submitter is scheduled to be here at 5 to 12, we will vote on the motion to extend and adjourn. We'll do that now, and we'll just have to wait to close the meeting until that time has passed, so that person has their opportunity. Oh, I need a second, Councillor Rogers. So we're adjourning until Monday.
A day on Monday?
Yeah, we'll let you have the weekend off. Thank you. And we will just wait for another 5 minutes. So we'll consider ourselves adjourned until, and I will let you know we'll close the meeting if the submitter hasn't arrived. Thank you.